Today, you're going to discover how selecting fibre reinforced polymer structural profiles for pedestrian boardwalks and bridges helped minimise project construction costs and significantly reduced the environmental impact on an important floodplain. Good morning, Australia, and good evening to our friends from the US, and welcome to our webinar case study on the Dominion Trail for the City of Frisco in Texas, USA. I'm Kelly Stewart, Marketing Manager at Wagners CFT, and I'm here with Landscape Architect and Project Manager from Halff, Justin Marston, and President of Wagners CFT North American Operations, Dennis Wagner Jr. Justin has more than 12 years' experience in park master planning and landscape construction and strives to create unique, out-of-the-box solutions for his clients with a commitment to sustainable practices and a belief in the work he does and its ability to improve lives and communities every day. Justin lives in Rowlett, Texas, with his wife, Mary Catherine, and 3 boys, Luke, Barrett, and Jake. Meanwhile, Dennis heads up our operations in North America for Wagners CFT, and Dennis will be facilitating today's Q&A session following Justin's presentation. Welcome, Justin and Dennis.
Thank you.
Before we get started, just a few webinar protocols. We are recording today's event, and we'll make the recording public via the Wagners CFT YouTube channel. We're going to run through Justin's presentations first and hold answering any questions until the end. You'll see at the top of your screen there is a chat tab where you can submit a question anytime during the webinar. Those questions will be compiled for discussion during the Q&A session following Justin's presentation. So let's dive in. I'd like to introduce Landscape Architect and Project Manager from Halff, Justin Marston.
All right, well, thank you. Can everybody see my screen?
Sure can.
Excellent. All right, well, thanks everybody. And for those of us in the US, happy Earth Day, and also happy World Landscape Architecture Month as well. The month of April is World Landscape Architecture Month, so I'm very happy to present this to you. So just a little bit about myself. I've been with Halff for 11 years. As Kelly introduced me, I've got 3 wonderful children. I've got a lot of interests and hobbies, so landscape architecture really does it for me to be able to do everything that I love to do, have a lot of interests and hobbies. And I'm also a really big NASCAR fan, and I have lots of actually autographed cars. And for the Australians in the room, I also have a couple that are signed by Marcus Ambrose, if you know who that is. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started and start talking through Dominion Trail. So again, we'll just kind of go over, we'll tell a little bit about Halff, the scope of work, the project context, kind of when we go through the trail design standards, as well as the challenges, solutions. We'll get a little bit into the construction and the process, and then the summary of the project, and then finally we'll follow up with some Q&A. So just a little bit about Halff. Again, Halff is a multidisciplinary solutions-based design firm that solves complex problems through a multifaceted approach. We've been around for over 70 years, and we're really just a one-stop shop, with providing different services with different disciplines. Continuously collaborating with our clients and internally to provide the best solutions for our clients and our users, and ultimately the project. Within the last 10 years, Halff has successfully designed over 70 trails totaling over 200 miles. And it's fascinating to see all the different trails that we've created within that time. But one of the quotes that I really enjoy by some guy named Ralph Waldo Emerson is, "Do not go where the path may lead, but go instead where there is no path and leave a trail." And that's exactly what we do. With as much space that Texas has, seems like we're trying to fit trails in places where they don't belong, but still successfully being able to do that. So that's kind of a testament to our design team. And that kind of leads into our dream team of Halff professionals that are able to work on this. When we work on a trail, people don't think about the different all the different aspects that you've got to be able to cover as part of that design. And so I'm very, very happy to say that Halff was able to work with all of our different disciplines and keep everything in house to be able to design this trail. We have 32 offices in 5 states in the southeastern United States: Arkansas, Florida, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Texas. And our headquarters are in Richardson, which is just outside north of Dallas. And we also have a office in Frisco, which happens to be our project location. So a little bit about the project and its context. Again, Frisco is about 35 miles north of Dallas. And a significant of that portion of trail was either in the floodplain or right adjacent to it. And this is on a tributary of Panther Creek, which is just down the street from the new PGA headquarters, golf headquarters, that was just built a couple years ago. Right at 1.1 miles of trail. And there was some existing 8-foot trail, and the idea was to connect into those the existing trail network through some additional connections. So our scope of work was to provide a 12-foot shared use path that worked into that existing trail network by replacing some of the existing segments and then creating some new segments along with 3 crossings. And the client's goals for this was to create, again, a 12-foot wide shared use path using AASHTO design standards and to limit the rise within the 100-year floodplain. So this is the kind of an aerial of the project site. You can see the Panther Creek tributary through there, and basically all that green area is basically the floodplain. So all that forested area is the floodplain. This were the trail connections, and so you can see where we began the project on the left, ended the project on the right with those 12-foot concrete trails with 3 individual trail crossings. So just to kind of go through, when we go through our design standards, we always try to design to AASHTO recommendation as guidelines. And basically all that is a standard setting body that kind of develops standards and design guidelines for different transportation infrastructure within the United States. They basically provide kind of, recommended widths and offsets to be able to make these areas safe. There's a guidebook that we basically follow as our kind of trail go-to that provides all these recommendations. Really, with that, when we do our minimum design for a shared use path is a 10 to 12 foot preferably with a 1-foot shoulder, which gives us a 14-foot clear zone. And then that has a design speed of about 18 miles an hour. That's going to depend on your vertical curvature and making sure that you have enough space for these design speeds with a minimum turn radius of 60 feet. Along with that, there are other specifications that you have to meet per AASHTO for those recommendations for bridges and boardwalks, primarily making sure the width of your structure, whether it be bridge or boardwalk, is the same width as your trail. So again, if we're doing a 12-foot wide path, we can also provide a 10-foot wide path with 1-foot shoulders, and that gives us that 12-foot clear that we're typically designing for. And basically with AASHTO, if it's wide enough for a vehicle, it must be able to hold a vehicle. So that'll come up later on. So going into the challenges for Dominion Trail, a lot of different aspects on this. Large utility lines being right adjacent to a neighborhood. There's all sorts of utilities going in through this area. Very large. There's like a 4-foot sanitary sewer pipeline in here. So there's always a big challenge on our trails. Another thing is private property owners. With all the houses around this area, and as much as people love their land here in Texas, they want the trail. They just, not all of them want it next to their house, and so we had to go through several different design phases to where we're looking for the best route for both feasibility as well as who we will be impacting adjacent to those property owners. It's always a touchy subject, but we always make sure we provide plenty of public input so that they understand what's going on and where things are going. Environmentally sensitive areas, we are always, we're stewards of the environment. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to avoid any environmentally sensitive areas that we have, whether it be trees or ordinary high water marks, to making sure that we're not impacting any threatened or endangered species. The floodplain was also a really big challenge on this project. In some areas, we're dealing with over 350 feet wide of floodplain, so that makes it for a little bit of a challenge when you've got to go up and above it. I know nobody deals with costs on projects, right? That was obviously a challenge on this one, just with the sheer amount of structures that we had and how we were kind of going through this. And finally, project design changes. I know nobody's ever had a project where they've tried to start one way and say this is the approach, and then when they get into it, they realize they've got to do something different. It's no different on this one, but we were able to adjust what we needed and work through it. So on that, going through the changes of design, the original scope was to provide a trail at grade within the floodplain and to use kind of more of a small, low profile, low water crossing. And with the original construction estimate was about 2.5 million. At the 60% design submittal, we submitted that to the city. They were reviewing everything and they said, okay, this isn't going to work. Y'all are going to have to bring all of the structures 2 feet above the 100-year floodplain, which when you have a very wide floodplain, that makes for a lot more challenging situations. So you're talking about 150, 200 foot span crossings, significant amount of elevated structures, bridge crossings, and this pushed our estimate to over $6.5 million. So with those challenges, the city needed solutions for maintaining the engineering requirements for that 2-foot freeboard over the floodplain. You got to work within the 100-year floodplain. You have a significant amount of elevated structures with unavoidable utilities. Oh, and by the way, we want you to reduce cost. So seems like a really easy thing to do, but we took these challenges head on. So looking at the bridge design, the easiest solution would just to say, hey, let's just do a single span bridge over the entirety of the floodplain. Well, when you're doing that and you're wanting to do 180 foot span across the floodplain, it gets really expensive. If you can shorten those spans, you can get smaller segments and you've got some cost savings there. But when you get into this, now you're asking yourself, well, how does the design of the bridge affect things like the floodplain? You're either adding more pieces within the floodplain or you're moving your abutments closer so you can reduce the width of that crossing. How is it going to affect utilities? So if you're putting something over the utility, are those going to have to be replaced? Are you going to have to replace a portion of the bridge if you ever have to place that utility? The constructability and how much equipment and what size of equipment are you going to need to bring in to make this possible? Also keep in mind, 180-foot steel bridge is about 150,000 pounds. And you've got to have a pretty good amount of equipment to be able to bring that in, which again drives costs up on those projects. So that was the challenge we were dealing with on the bridge design. The other portion of that was within the floodplain. So we wanted to segment the bridges up and say, okay, we can get some smaller pieces in here and it's a lot more affordable. As you go larger, the larger the spans, the exponentially cost increase you're getting. So even with the smaller sections of bridges, they still have quite a bit of weight to them. And so basically with this, we were going to have to put 24-inch concrete piers and vents within the floodplain. And just for these 2 crossings alone, I mean, we're talking about 7 24-inch piers. That equates to 14 feet of structures that are basically going to be in the middle of the floodplain. When we did this, our hydraulic engineers are really good, but they can't just make up numbers. And when they ran the numbers, we were facing an 18-inch rise within the floodplain. And the city, I think, understood that, just with this project, that they were probably not going to achieve a 0 rise in the floodplain. But from our minds, an 18-inch rise was not acceptable. So, we had to come up with a better solution. So now what? We need something that's strong, something that's durable, something that's lightweight, cost effective, something that looks good, easy to work with, and has to be able to reduce impacts within the floodplain. So that's when we started looking more into FRP, fiber reinforced polymer. So again, it started checking off all the boxes that we needed. It's high strength, it's lightweight, it looks good, has non-corrosive properties and a long lifespan. And we were actually looking at using FRP specifically for the boardwalks of this project. And talking with the manufacturer, they said, we're already doing the boardwalks, so why not, do the bridges out of FRP as well? And we were like, well, how long can you do? And they felt confident they could do up to 100-foot span with FRP. And so we said, okay, well, let's look at that. So we started to work with them, and basically with the lighter weight material, we got significantly smaller piers from 5-inch to 9-inch, and it was able to hold a vehicle. So we started looking at this, and we started running the hydraulic analysis on these. And so when you go from 24-inch piers to 9-inch piers, we saw a 62.5% reduction in the surface area of those piers within the floodplain. So now you're going from 14 feet of blockage within the floodplain to now 5.25 feet of blockage. And so when we reran these calculations in these hydraulic models, we only got a 5-inch rise in the floodplain. So that was a 72% reduction to the water surface elevation from using the concrete piers to using these 9-inch FRP piers. So it was a huge difference. And again, I think the city understood that unless they're spending $10 million to be able to do this and get a zero rise in the floodplain, that was just not feasible. But what we were designed and recommending, basically any sort of rise that was happening that adjusted that floodplain. It was not affecting any of the adjacent homeowners. It was still well within the flood areas, and so they were accepting of that design. Looking at the solutions for the utilities, this was one that we were really concerned about. But basically we said, well, with the lightweight, they said, why can't we just unbolt these smaller sections of bridge and just be able to move it out of the way and do your utility work and then, basically put it back on. And that was really, I think, a really good selling point as well. When you're dealing with a steel bridge with the concrete decking, which is kind of our typical go-to, for most of these trail designs, when it's all said and done, you're looking at over 40,000 pounds to be able to lift up and move through. And it's not necessarily, it starts to get to a point where it's no longer feasible to just be able to pick it up and move it over and then put it back. So the fact that you're only dealing with 13,000 pounds is really nice to be able to work with. So again, also with reducing construction cost, I'd mentioned the smaller pieces, the lighter weights, you need smaller equipment, and typically that pushes to a smaller cost as well. You've got less time on the site with that, just because you're not just dealing with such large and bulky equipment. The largest piece that we had being lifted into place was 17,000 pounds, and that was a 70-foot bridge. We pieced the 100-foot bridge together in different segments, and this was a 3-day install for 9 bridges of 500 feet. There was a 1-day install for the 100-foot bridge, and then the rest of the bridges in 2 different sites was 2 days. But honestly, I think they could have got it done in 1 day. They had the contractor had not finished kind of the abutment portions of the intermediate bents, and so they said, let's just do what we need to do, and then we'll come back tomorrow and do the other one. But I really think they could have got it done in 2 days. But again, that maximum lifting weight of 17,000 pounds, it significantly reduces the amount of equipment that you need when you're putting this together. Another big challenge and solution in the bridge design, I mentioned the AASHTO recommendation for pedestrian bridges. Specifically for FRP is very different from steel and concrete. The frequency of the bridge, so basically the bounciness of the bridge for FRP was 5 hertz. And we were only able to get 4.2, and that was only for the 100-foot bridge. All of the other ones met or exceeded that 5 hertz criteria. But basically, when it came down to it, there was nothing structurally wrong with the bridge. Uh, the real issue was if you have 50 people at the same time walking in unison, a user might be able to feel more sway in the bridge and might feel more uncomfortable with that. But again, nothing structurally wrong with the bridge. But again, it was just more of the user feel to it. The next portion was the deflection, or I think the bendiness is what I think structural engineers used to call it. But basically the movement of the bridge with the initial weight of the vehicle. So as a vehicle load kind of goes on the bridge, there's going to be some compression and deflection with that design. There were some areas we were less than 1/4 of an inch over the maximum allowable tolerance that AASHTO recommends. But basically, again, nothing wrong structurally, but again, it would could definitely cause them uncomfortable with seeing that going over the bridge. But again, nothing wrong structurally. And really the bridge capacity and versus the cost effectiveness. So AASHTO recommends, again, if it's as wide as a vehicle, it's got to be able to hold a vehicle. And an H10 loading would be more of an emergency vehicle, 20,000 pounds. We were able to meet an H5 load, which is 10,000 pounds, 5 tons. And this is really just for a maintenance truck. It would definitely be able to hold that. We provided additional signage for the weight limit. But when you start getting into the size and the scale of the bridge and the capacity that it's needed to be able to reach that H10, you've got to have a lot beefier members, and the cost effectiveness just doesn't quite make sense. We were still able to meet the 90 pounds per square feet for pedestrians, but at the end of the day, the bridge's intended use was a shared use pedestrian bridge. Anything beyond that, we might as well be designing a highway bridge, but its intended use was for pedestrians. And because of the location and the proximity to the adjacent neighborhood, we did not feel that there was any need for an emergency vehicle to be able to have to use this. If we were in a remote location, that might be a different story, but we didn't see any issues with this. And at the end of the day, having these conversations with the city and understanding the intended purpose of the bridge, that there was nothing wrong structurally, it meets its designed purpose, which is a pedestrian bridge. Ultimately, the city was able to accept the design. So just kind of getting in a little bit into the construction, this was really fascinating to kind of see them kind of work through. And we had a fantastic contractor on the project, and that's half the battle sometimes. But they really knew what they were doing, really asked really good questions, and were able to work with the manufacturer as well. So these are a picture of those 9-inch piles. And so for each of the bridge and where you're having bridge to bridge connection or bridge to boardwalk connection, we had these 9-inch piles. And so going in, digging those holes, boring those holes out for the day, and then putting in those you putting your jig in and then backfilling it with concrete. That was a pretty typical approach. Same thing for the boardwalk. These guys were laying these out, and they basically went down one side and drilled all their holes, ran your string line, were able to put all of the vertical posts in there and backfill with the concrete that day. Then they'd come back the next day, do the bore holes on the other side, able to backfill it with concrete, and just had a really nice straight line for these piers. So just again, some more pictures of these piers going in different portions. Then they were able to basically put those structural pieces, connecting those piers together as it went through. And really, once you get to that point, then you're basically kind of building, how you would build a wood deck as well. You've got your joists on there. You start again continuing your vertical structures and your support pieces underneath. Once you do that, then we got this is where we brought our bridges in, and we had several different size bridges. Um, these were all brought in on truck, and they were all fully assembled. Being able to bring those up over the treetops was a really spectacular sight to see. And really, one of the biggest challenges that we actually had on this was actually just getting the bridges to the construction site. That is one thing I'm going to make sure that how the logistics of getting your stuff to your site. These were 70-foot bridges. In some case, trying to make some very maneuverable ways through the community. And I think we took out a couple of signs and mailboxes, but we were able to get those back together. But that was one of the challenges that we dealt with. So I always think about that when you put these in. But basically, you've got a crane there bringing those in. You've got guys on the ground that are help pushing this in place. And yes, they were hand pushing it in place with that crane. They were also using things like a skid steer to kind of help lift and place that where it needed to go. Pretty impressive to see all those together. Basically, once you had your bridges in place with the structure, and you start to get your boardwalks in, then you start putting your cover tops on. This was also an FRP lighter weight material. Again, I mentioned us using concrete quite a bit for our typical trail bridge crossings, and this was really the kind of the equivalent to that, but it's definitely a lighter weight material, very strong. It's got a nice, really good grip to it, so that you don't have any slip issues when you're riding on the trail, and it does kind of have that kind of concrete color and texture to it. And it's got a nice feel when you walk across it. But again, that lightweight material is able to be put on those joists, and basically from there you're just finishing up, putting your rails on, putting your top rails on, and making this project complete. So it was a really neat thing to see all this. So basically, the final structure design. There was 9 bridges totaling 500 feet, and we actually only had 4 different design lengths, and I think that also kind of helped with the cost, being able to replicate basically the same bridge instead of having 9 different lengths, and then having those 9-inch connections for the piers for the bridge and boardwalks. And then the boardwalks, we had 267 linear feet in 3 different segments. And all of those boardwalk piers were only 5 inches in diameter, and those were spaced 18 inches on center. The final project design breakdown. So, again, for this trail that's 1.25 miles, 5,800 linear feet of concrete trails. There were 3 separate bridge crossings, totaling about just under 800 linear feet, and that was 12-foot wide. There was 6 abutments. We had over 6,000 square feet of stone retaining walls, some of which had to span over. We had to have a structural span over utilities, and then over 1,500 linear feet of pedestrian rail as well. So how much does all this cost? Thank you for asking. So for the engineer's opinion of probable cost, we came in at 5.2 million, and that was with a 15% contingency. So our base without the contingency was right around 4.6 million. The city bid this out and had 5 competitive bids, and that ranged from 4.6 to 5.5 million. So we felt we were right on the money with our cost estimate. The final construction cost with change orders was 4.6 million. And really, like I said, I think that that's a testament to the knowledge and experience that we have building these trails, and just looking at our history and just learning every day from it. And this whole project was an 18-month construction from start to finish, and it is wrapping up here in the next couple weeks. Our key takeaways, basically look at every challenge as an opportunity. You can learn from it. You gain the experience from it. You got to bring all ideas to that table. And there's really no bad ideas unless it's like a really bad idea. And basically talking with the city and saying, hey, we have this product that we think would be a great match, and would solve a lot of our problems that we're dealing with on this project. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. So always be willing to throw an idea out there. Again, I mentioned planning out the logistics of construction, making sure that you understand the sequence of how things need to be built. And then, again, open and willing to learn all the time. If you have an open mind, like, the sky's the limit. So always be willing to learn. Finally, why do we do what we do? I truly feel like, I improve lives and communities. We connect people to places, and seeing, a family ride their bikes all together on a trail that didn't exist 6 months ago, and seeing that family be able to ride, and enjoy nature is a really, really good feeling. We met a gentleman out there that was like, hey, I can now ride to the grocery store that's only half a mile away, and I can bring my groceries back. And so, helping people provide that connection between the natural and the built environments, and being able to enhance those outside experiences is really something that just really just drives us to do what we do. So we really enjoy that. So with that, that's all I've got. That was a lot of information, I realize, but we'll open up for questions here.
Fantastic presentation, and so much information. We're going to let people just have a little minute to digest and start popping their questions into the chat facility there. Dennis is ready and waiting for those questions at the moment. Before we dive into the Q&A section, just to allow Justin to have a drink of water and gather his thoughts, I just wanted to quickly share 2 quick slides about some new things that are happening at Wagners CFT. So Wagners CFT has recently published its new environmental product declaration with EPD Australasia. This EPD provides customers with credible environmental information about our products that has been independently verified and is internationally recognised. So EPDs give asset owners the tools they need to be able to calculate the environmental impact of a project and contribute towards decarbonisation in construction by choosing products with reduced embodied carbon over products with high embodied carbon. These calculations can also be used towards meeting carbon targets and assessing incentives or rewards for decarbonisation. So the QR code on the screen there will take you to a story about Wagners' new EPD, which includes links to get a copy of our EPD and watch a webinar on how to use the EPD. I'll also pop that link into the chat facility. So if you don't have a QR code, you can access that story and those resources. Wagners has also recently launched its new 356 FRP utility pole, which is making waves in Australia in the wake of hardwood timber shortages. The new 356 FRP utility pole complements Wagners' existing 301 and 293 poles, of which some 6,000 poles have headed out to networks in Australia in the past 6 months. The QR code on the screen there will take you to a bit of a story about the new 356 poles and includes links to a technical brochure for more details and a video detailing how Wagners manufacture their utility poles as well. So again, if you don't have that QR code reader, the link has just been put in the chat facility. So at this stage, I'd also like to welcome Michael Kim and Ricardo Sanchez from the City of Frisco, who have joined us, and I know that they're online there today as well. So if you have some questions for the City of Frisco and this project, Dominion Trail, please feel free to pop those questions into the chat box, and we'll invite Michael and Ricardo to answer those. So Dennis, let's dive in. I'm going to throw over to you now and we'll dive into the Q&A session of this webinar.
We established manufacturing in we've supplied about 45,000 square foot of boardwalk. So we offer a full range of our composite products in the marine and the electrical space as well. But the large focus for us in the US has been in pedestrian structures and fishing piers and pedestrian bridges and boardwalks. And it's been certainly a very exciting journey since then. And I think, one of the big questions that we often get, are people using it? Frisco has over 250,000 people in it, and this particular trail, when you spend as much time as we've spent out there, you understand that there are two large housing developments on either side of it, and so it really is giving access there, and giving access to the local elementary school for a lot of their constituents. We were out there on a Sunday morning about 3 weeks ago. We were heading out of town, so we thought we would just swing by and assess in real time whether people are using it. And in the space of an hour, we probably saw 40 or 50 people across the various trails. And we did manage to interrogate a few of the locals and ask, how they're enjoying it. And we got lots of thumbs up and lots of smiles. And I think they realised that we were wearing high vis, so they thought we must have something to do with the bridges. So it was good. We could answer a few questions for the local constituents that were actively out there using the trail. And so I think the one of the big cost savings that Justin has talked about here, and from our perspective, we really like to work with all of our stakeholders in providing value, and that's providing value to Halff during the design phase. It's providing value to the general contractor during the install phase, and it's providing long-term value for the asset owner, in this case the City of Frisco. But you've really got to hit all of those, advocate for all of these benefits to your different stakeholders, to see these projects come to fruition. And I think Justin, you touched on a lot of the design benefits in being able to reduce the size of the pile and lessen the impact of the floodplain, which was huge, as well as the utility easements. And it is fairly unique to be able to have a 40-foot structure that you if needed could remove by lunchtime if you're out there and had the proper equipment. So being able to work through these challenges is something that we take a lot of pride in. I think from an installation perspective, the most challenging part for us was really scheduling the deliveries. And so we were fortunate enough to have some support to leave a lot of the bridges in a holding yard overnight, so then we could really stagger our deliveries. Not only for the fact that there is a crane on site that is installing these structures and needs to be kept busy at all times, but the location of the project, you actually couldn't have more than one bridge or one truck in there at any given time. It was going to hold up all of the traffic and cut off access to residential neighbourhoods. So it was equally important to get the previous truck out at the same time as you were getting the next truck in, as well as all of these loads were oversized. And so But we had a good think about it, and I think the trick in Texas to moving these things around is to do your cargo on Sunday morning while everyone's at church, but don't let it go too long before it gets into football time, because if the Cowboys are playing, or if the Cowboys are about to be playing, then the traffic will be blocked up. And so we managed to get kind of 6 bridges out of our yard at about 7:30 in the morning on Sunday, and we had them all in the holding yard by about 11. And so that was kind of the key to that. And then on the Monday and Tuesday mornings, we could work very closely with the general contractor to ensure that the deliveries were on time and flowing properly, as well as, they were coming in the right sequence, but they were coming at the right end to end. And between our design includes fixed ends and sliding ends to allow for movement in the bridges. And that gave us an opportunity to really make sure that we were kind of supporting our install contractors and getting them the bridges on time in their various different forms. So I think the utility easement was certainly an interesting design parameter. As Justin said, the total bridges weighed about 13,000 pounds. They were able to be installed, just with a reach lift being lifted out and forked into place. It gave us a fair bit of flexibility when it came to actually moving them and setting them as well, if we did need to shuffle them around a little bit. And to give you some perspective, the one of the bridges, the 100-foot bridge, which is our largest, most challenging bridge to not only supply but also install and get it right, given that it had 2 boardwalk connections. There was no concrete abutments on the 100-foot bridge. They were both boardwalk connections. So you've got to have your boardwalk connection lined up and in the right places, and then married into your bridge connection. And it can take a bit of fiddling around, but for the 100-foot bridge, we needed to shift it about 2 inches in one direction, and the boardwalk had been installed, and it wasn't going to be a cost. It wasn't going to be an acceptable outcome to go and rent a crane to come and move a bridge 2 inches. And so what we did was we set up some scaffolding underneath the bridges, and we actually just used a car jack out of the back of one of our trucks to be able to jack the bridge up just slightly enough so we could move the support that was under it and get it into the right location. So I think, in terms of FRP, the lightweight nature is definitely presents the most immediate cost savings. You can easily handle these things. You can easily troubleshoot these things. It's one thing to plan out a project, but it's very difficult to plan out, the challenges that you may have, with wet weather, or with, trucks not showing up, or the access that you thought you would have just isn't quite there. And so, having a material that closely with our installation partners on, to outline the lightweight nature of it, so they could really optimize their installation timelines, was a huge success. And I think that obviously the long-term value that the asset we're passing on to the asset owner is the maintenance free. So all of these structures were coated in a fluoropolymer coating. And so we work with a supplier for our fluoropolymer coatings who's done a webinar with us before. Very high quality material. It's a market leading material, and it really moves the needle in terms of the maintenance requirements. When you're talking about a 25-year gloss retention guarantee, and a recoating of that material in 40 years, you just aren't achieving anything of that longevity on the market as it currently is. So I think that the maintenance and the long-term decrease of costs, I think that the major costs for an asset owner in this application is coming back and having to replace the decking or all of the structures or the foundations in 7 to 15 years after a big flood's come through, or it just hasn't withstood the test of time against the environment. And so having this structure in place now, and it looks fantastic, is certainly a huge asset for the community.
Dennis, while we've got Michael Kim on the line from City of Frisco, Michael, I've just given you access to the microphone and your video if you wanted to pop in and answer this little quick question. I just wanted to know if you could give us a bit of a brief as to how Dominion Trail fits into the overall strategy for pedestrian infrastructure for the City of Frisco.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, Kelly. Hi, everyone. Can you guys hear me okay?
We sure can.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, presentation's great, Justin. Dennis, I totally second in terms of the ease of access for. I just wanted to answer your question before I got into the hike and bike trail master plan, Kelly, of the ease for the City of Frisco to get into our utility easements. It really, because of the alignment of the trail and just the flexibility and the ease of the bridge material itself, being able to just as quickly dismantle it as we were able to install it, it really isn't a problem for the City of Frisco when it comes to, major, like for example, if we needed to go in there and do an overhaul of our sewer lines, and I think that's the only real major utility, right, Justin? I think that we're dealing with no franchise. Well, we have franchise utility, but that really doesn't matter. Just kidding. That does matter. Don't tell that. As for the hike and bike master plan, this segment of the trail was really key. I actually had the opportunity. I had just gotten into the City of Frisco about 1.5 years ago. This is just about when the project was going into construction, so it had already been bid out and awarded to our general contractor, and then it became my kind of I guess it became my project. Previous Justin was working with the previous park planner and also my supervisor Ricardo. I don't think is online today. I think he got sick. But anyways, so I got the opportunity to really kind of take all the design and the hard work that they had done previously, and then see it to fruition, right? See it built, and that's one of the best parts. This segment of the trail is pretty important because it makes a big connection. I think Justin alluded to it earlier about the connection to our PGA. The PGA, not ours, but the PGA headquarters that's just been built a couple years ago. And they have some trails as well over there. And so in order to give access to all residents in Frisco, this segment allows people going from our absolute eastern boundary of the city all the way to the west. And then when it's all said and done, you're going to be able to go east, west, and then transfer onto another trail to go north and south. This essentially is a spine for our hiking plan, and it's really important. I think during the presentation, Justin had alluded to people using it. Dennis, you talked about people giving you the high five and the thumbs up when you guys went to go look at it. There is a lot of people who have been anticipating this trail, and we are about to wrap up this week. I think possibly next week. We have our last inspection. We also have to do our ADA inspection, but besides that, it's pretty much open. People were walking on it while it was half complete. They just couldn't wait, and it's hard as. Some of you might know, being a PM, telling your residents you can't get on the shiny new, trail, or you can't be on the shiny new park when it's just about right there, right? So, pretty important segment of the trail, and really, as a representative of the city, I just want to say we're so happy how it turned out. It couldn't have been better, and just the from beginning to end on the construction aspect of it. It really was. I think I could speak for many project managers. It was a pleasure to work on. I know sometimes it can get kind of hairy if you don't get the right contractor, or when construction just it just happens that way, right? So But great project and a very important part of our hike and bike master plan.
Excellent. Thank you so much for getting thrown in the deep end there too, and answering those questions for us. Dennis, it doesn't look like we have any more questions there. We'll just give people a moment just to see if there's anything else that they want to ask either Justin or. Looks like we are done and dusted there. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. All right, so that does conclude our webinar today and our Q&A session. We hope you enjoyed it and thank you very much for coming. We would ask you to complete the feedback form from today's webinar. You can use the QR code on the screen to access the webinar feedback form, or I'm just about to pop the link into the chat box there as well. We only get about 10% of people who attend our webinars complete the feedback form, but your feedback is hugely valuable to us because it helps us craft better webinars for you in the future. So if you could take the 2 minutes and complete the form, I'd be most grateful. The other thing that I've added to the form this week as well is if you are interested in being a guest speaker on one of Wagner's webinar series, head to that feedback form and select yes to be a guest speaker and tell us a little bit about the webinar idea that you have. I'm really looking forward to receiving those ideas. So our next webinar is on the 28th of May and will feature guest speakers Dr. Ali Mohammed from Wagners CFT and Bjorn Jarkman from Keo Myers. They're going to be pulling apart the design of Epripar Bridge for Victoria Point in Queensland, Australia, which when it is built will be the longest FRP truss bridge in the Southern Hemisphere. This webinar is going to focus on design standards and basis, frequency, connections, member and member design. So it's going to be a highly technical presentation and we'd love to see you there. So again, you can use the QR code or I've just popped the link into the chat boxes now. Of course, after today's webinar, everybody will get a follow-up email. So if there's anything that you've missed and you want some of these links that we've put in today, don't fear, they'll be in the email that we send out shortly. So we're going to head out today watching that fantastic video of Dominion Trail that we came in on. I'm just pulling that up now. So thanks so much for coming and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Justin, thank you very much for your presentation today and Dennis, thank you for coming. It's been a great webinar.
Yes,
see you next time.
Much.